talked about the Racial Justice Coalition of Nebraska, and Erin Hayes is here today representing that organization. Erin Hayes is in her final year of law school at Washington and Lee University School of Law in Lexington, Virginia. Erin is originally from Houston, Texas, and attended Baylor University in Waco, Texas, where she majored in medical humanities. Throughout her law school career, Erin has been focused on criminal law with a specific interest in capital defense. She clerked with the Fredericksburg Public Defender Office in Fredericksburg, Virginia during the summer of 2019. For the summer of 2020, Erin clerked remotely with the Richland Public Defender and the Capital Trial Division in Columbia, South Carolina. She is currently a student attorney with Washington and Lee's Virginia Capital Case Clearinghouse Clinic, where she assists in death penalty trials and advocates for parolees. Additionally, she is an ambassador for the School of Law and was the 2019 vice president for the Women Law Students Organization. Following graduation, Erin hopes to pursue a career in criminal defense, as well as assist in future death penalty legislation. Please join me in welcoming Erin Hayes today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Jason for talking about Send Ernest Home. We are, the RJC is his national organizers for Send Ernest Home, and we're really excited. So we thank you for circulating that petition for us. I am here today to not talk about Send Ernest Home, but I am talking about the Racial Justice Coalition of Nebraska. I actually primarily work on the Texas team, which we are introducing the Racial Justice Act where it's focused on capital sentencing. But the bill that we've introduced in Nebraska, it's LB 548, and it is more general. It's based on all felonies. So for the Racial Justice Coalition in general, we're focused on addressing racial disparities within sentencing as well as within convictions, largely by using and gathering statistical evidence. We're a nonpartisan group of individuals and organizations united to fight racial justice in sentencing and convictions, and it is our mission to advocate, educate, and research the issues of racial bias within the criminal justice system at large. As I said, we have two different branches. We have the Nebraska branch and we have the Texas branch. The Texas branch is focused primarily on death sentence, and if an individual on death row is able to show that racial bias played a significant factor in any aspect of their trial, including sentencing or convictions, or the prosecutor choosing to seek the death penalty, then the individual will be able to reduce their sentence to life without parole. If you could scroll down on the Nebraska side, sorry about that. Thank you. So we're also focused on Nebraska. We know that Omaha is a deeply segregated city, and there's a lack of national attention and investment in Nebraska. So we would like to bring research and advocacy to Nebraska. The RJC assesses all forms of sentencing disparities as it relates to felonies. All felonies. So discussing the racial disparities in the Nebraska prison population, here is a chart that shows the racial disparities, and it's pretty alarming in Nebraska. Black men are overrepresented by 8 times their share of the population. Black women are overrepresented by 3 times their share of the population. And alarmingly, Native American women are overrepresented by 6 times their share, while white women are underrepresented. All of our data comes from OIG and from excuse me, sorry, I can't remember the name of the organization, Voices of Children. I know that Danielle brought it up earlier. So I know Danielle touched on racial disparities in sentencing outcomes for juveniles, but we wanted to jump into some of the data for that as well. While Black youth comprised of 6% of Nebraska's youth population, 18% of the charges in juvenile court were brought against Black youth. And in general, youth of color are more likely to be placed on probation than white youth. And as Danielle said, judges are less likely to find creative means of sentencing for juveniles for individuals of color. As we said, Black youth comprised 6% of Nebraska's youth population in 2016, but 21% of the youth was placed on probation were Black youth. Looking at life sentences, this is data that we gathered as an organization, and we're planning on doing more research within Nebraska just because it's difficult to find numbers. For life sentences in Douglas County, folks who received life sentences, the average minimum sentence for Black individuals was 56 years, but for white individuals, it was 14 years. That disparity is unacceptable and honestly just frightening. For Lancaster County, white individuals were given some of the lowest minimum life sentences, some going as low as 20 years, but for Black individuals, the lowest minimum sentence was 60 years. So the Black to white population of Lancaster County is 1 to 25, and yet first degree sentences are 1 to 2. Second degree sentences are 1 to 1, and with second degree murder, the sentencing ranges significant, or they demonstrate a significant difference. This is our data on life without parole. There's an evident difference in the age of Black defendants sentenced to life without parole versus a white defendant sentenced to life without parole. Black defendants tend to serve or to receive LWOP much younger than their white counterparts. You can see on the chart that Black defendants ages 30 to 40 are just an incredible disproportionate amount to white defendants. So we know that racial bias contributes to racial disparities in our prison population and as well as in sentencing. That's where the RJA comes in. Racial bias within the courtroom, it can influence all aspects of a trial, from jury selection to charging decisions and to sentencing. Allowing racial bias to influence in any case is injustice. However, a defendant's ability to demonstrate the effect of racial bias in the trial process is severely limited under current law. Today's current constitutional framework provides little recourse, and unless the defendant can meet an incredibly high standard of proof, a court will not hold that the racial bias violated the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. However, just because bias does not satisfy the standard requirement to show an equal protection violation doesn't mean that bias should be tolerated by the state legislators. It's just as Jason said, we can't allow the laws just to say that it is what it is and that we need to accept it. Implicit and explicit bias contribute to longer sentences, higher rates of conviction, and harsher sentencing decisions, especially for Black individuals and people of color. And the data shows us that Black individuals suffer the highest rates of racial disparity in these categories. Currently, statistical evidence is not presented to show that racial bias influenced the outcome of a defendant's case. Nebraskans must rely on state or federal constitutional provisions to challenge discrimination in the criminal justice system. The Nebraska Post-Conviction Act further limits post-conviction appeals. So what is the Racial Justice Act? Kentucky passed its own version in 1988, and then in more recent years, North Carolina passed it in 2009, and it was specifically limited to those on death row. The law was overturned in 2013, but for the 4 years that the RJA was in effect, North Carolina covered claims for more than 130 death row inmates. Texas has introduced 2 versions of the RJA in 2013. What was important about this first round of Texas RJA was that there was some district attorneys who actually supported the legislation. And we are set to introduce the Racial Justice Act in Texas this week, which is really exciting for us. This summer, California passed the Racial Justice Act, and it's the more broad version. Just like Nebraska, it's for all felonies. However, the Nebraska RJA is the broadest racial justice act that has ever been brought. So LB 548 is filed under or with Senator Wayne. It would allow an individual convicted of a felony to challenge their sentencing or their conviction through the admission of statistical evidence and other material on the basis that racial bias was a substantial factor in the outcome of their case. The RJA would permit an individual to show racial bias by admitting the following evidence: explicit racial bias by an attorney, judge, law enforcement expert witness, or juror involved in the case. Obviously, this evidence is really hard to obtain, but it does happen. The use of racially discriminatory language in court and during the criminal proceedings, whether intentional or not. Racial bias in jury selection, such as removing all or nearly all of the people of color from the jury. Statistical disparities in charging and convictions, and statistical disparities in sentencing, which is why the RJA is also working on gathering evidence of these statistical disparities so that they can be used in the future to support claims. Jury selection: Black potential juries are routinely excluded from juries, especially when the defendant on trial is Black as well. And especially when the victim is white. So the MSU College of Law report on jury selection showed that a statistically significant disparity exists at a magnitude of more than 2 to 1, whether calculated by looking at all strike decisions pooled across cases or by comparing the mean strike rates for all cases in which a Black veneer member was eligible to serve. The MSU study found that there's a disparity of at least 2 to 1 when we exclude any potential juror with one of several potentially objectionable qualities. This was the study that the RJA in California relied upon. I believe that we can skip the next 2 slides on bats and challenges just for the sake of time. But I do want to let you guys know how you can get involved. You can advocate, you can call or email your senator in support of LB 548 when it moves to a general vote. You can stay updated on our Instagram, our Twitter, and our Facebook. And you can join the RJC as a team member. If you are interested in joining our team and feel like you have something that you would be able to bring to us, please email us. We'd love to have you. And these slides will be available to you through our link tree on any of our social medias. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Jasmine, for setting this all up. I think this is a wonderful thing to talk about and a great day to do it.
Thank you so much, Erin. That's a wealth of information. Again, I'll make sure that Danielle's slides, Erin's slides, are available to everyone. I'll also drop in the link for Jason's video and make sure that we send out the link for the Free Ernest Jackson movement. We cannot do this work reforming our criminal justice system in Nebraska without people, and we have to be action-oriented and action-based. And that's what the Lobby Day is for. So we have senators and or their staff who have